All right, you are good to go, George.
Fantastic. Welcome everyone to my presentation on spending plans, a road to financial success. My name is George Dillman, and I'm the Consumer Outreach Specialist with the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities. So according to Investopedia, a personal spending plan helps you identify your cash flow. It can help you understand how you earn and spend your money. When paired with a financial goals worksheet, the personal spending plan can be used to create a roadmap for monitoring your spending and helping you achieve your financial goals. In a nutshell, we're looking at what's coming in as far as income versus what's going out as far as expenses. And the whole idea is to make sure we have more coming in than what's going out. And we have enough in between, enough additional funds in between that we can use towards those personal goals that we're going to be looking to set, and we'll talk about that shortly. As far as those goals that we're looking to set for future purposes. So yeah, what's coming in versus what's going out. Another way to put it is we're looking at living below our means. And I don't want to, I say that with the stipulation, we don't want to look at that as a negative thing as opposed to a positive thing. Oh, okay, George, yeah, you want me to live below my means. That means I'm going to be eating hot dogs and baked beans, all week long in order. No. We're looking at this things that we can do, either cutting back, or what I like to talk about, or what I like to do is swapping out, where you're getting the same bang for less buck. And again, we'll talk more about that as we go along. But living below our means, cutting back or swapping out to free up those additional funds that we can use for those goals, those SMART goals we're looking to create. A lot of people, there's a lot of people out there who have money, who famously, in some cases, famously live below their means. Gentleman that I like to point out all the time is a gentleman by the name of Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, who only has about $100 billion in his bank account, famously lives below his means. This is a gentleman who still lives in the same house that he bought back in the 1950s, long before he had $100 billion in his bank account. Now, bigger than any house I'm ever going to live in. But for the money that he has, he could certainly be living in something much bigger, much grander. But he says, why do I need it? He says, I'm happy with the house that I have. I don't need anything else. Why do I need to have something, 10 times the size or 100 times the size? Now, for what I do also know is he has one or two vacation homes too, but his primary house hasn't changed. This is a person who famously will go out and not buy new cars. He when he needs another car, another vehicle, he buys a used vehicle. He knows the money that you can save by buying something a couple years old. We all know the old story about buying a brand new car, and the minute you drive it off the dealership lot, it loses a couple $1,000s in value because it is now a used vehicle. He'll go out and buy something used, and he sees the value of saving those funds. This is, again, he loves going out. One of his favorite restaurants to go to is McDonald's. And when he goes there, he uses coupons, $100 billion in the bank account, but he gets them in the mail like everyone else. He says, why not use them and save some money that way? So this is what we're looking at. Living below our means. A lot of people, and one of the articles that I forwarded to Nicole is on how a lot of people out there live paycheck to paycheck, essentially, living to their means. For every dollar that's coming in, there's a dollar going out the door, so to speak, and nothing left over to set aside for these SMART goals, again, that we're going to be talking about shortly. Living paycheck to paycheck, no matter what the income level. Yeah, we could see, in fact, on average, I think that across the board, almost 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Even people who make or who make six figures or more, $100,000 a year or more, 40, something like up to 40%, maybe even more of these people are living paycheck to paycheck. So no matter what somebody is making, people out there that are, again, that they're living to their means. They're living to their means. And unfortunately, there are people out there who live above their means. For every dollar that's coming in, there might be $1.25, $1.50 going out the door. Yeah, going out the door. And they have to have this, they have to have that, and they just go further and further and further into debt until there's no coming back, so to speak. So what we're looking at doing is not living to our means, we're looking at living below our means, freeing up those additional funds to set aside for those SMART goals we're looking to set money aside for, like our long-term retirement goals. To have something above and beyond Social Security. 45 to 50% of Americans retire with nothing to fall back on but a Social Security check. And for a lot of us, that just doesn't cut it. So what can we do? So what we can do is set some of those funds aside, even if it's $20 or $30 a paycheck. $20 or $30 a paycheck over the next 10, 20, 30 years will really add up to give us something in addition. So what can we set aside to put away for our long-term retirement goals? What can we set aside for our short-term emergency funds, which we'll be talking about as well. So this is what we're looking at. This is what we're going to cover today: goal setting, cash flow and tracking expenses, creating the plan, and monitoring / adjusting that plan as needed. So we're looking at setting SMART goals. Those financial goals. In fact, one of the handouts that I forwarded to Nicole that you can certainly get a copy of is a financial goals worksheet where we can list those financial goals that we're looking to achieve over the next year, over the next 3 to 5 years, or 10 plus years. So what is a SMART goal? A SMART goal is a goal that is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and has a time frame to it. And it doesn't have to be anything long and drawn out. It doesn't have to be the next Gettysburg Address. Something as simple as, I will save $300 in 6 months for a new smartphone. Say I purchase a new smartphone every 3 to 5 years, which I do, every 3 to 5 years. And I'm looking to, so every 3 to 5 years over the course of a year, I'm looking to set funds aside in this scenario for that new smartphone. So I don't have to put something or something else on that plastic card with those high interest rates. I'm setting those funds aside over the course, in this case, 6 months, to purchase that new, or I should say newer smartphone. I think we all know what we could pay. I got well over $1,000, depending on what we're looking to get. But in this scenario, I'm looking to get a newer version of a smartphone, and I'm looking to spend about $300. So let's take a look at it. Let's make sure it is a SMART goal. Specific, I think it is $300. Measurable, I think we could measure that. Attainable and realistic, that's going to be up to us. Where do I free up the additional $50 a month over the next 6 months? So I have the funds. In 6 months, I have the funds to be able to buy that outright, as opposed to, again, putting something else on the plastic credit card. Time frame, we have a time frame to it. And as I mentioned earlier, this as well as other things, and we'll talk more about the short-term emergency fund that we're going to need to have, the long-term retirement goals, and everything in between, so to speak. And that's what we're doing, with this frame. What are our goals? And as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at essentially 3 types of goals: short-term goals, mid-range goals, and long-term goals. Short-term goal might be that new smartphone that we're looking to get in 6 months. Maybe a vacation, family vacation down at the shore over the course of the next year. Family goes, they like to go down maybe to the shore every year for vacation. They know this ahead of time. They know the next summer they're going to be back down there. So rather than throwing it on the credit card again, maybe the husband and wife say, "Hey, honey, let's put that money aside. Let's find those additional funds, maybe $100 a month. It's going to cost us about $1,000 for that family vacation. Where can we put aside $100 a month, or where can we find $100 a month to put aside so we can save at least most of that money over the course of the next year? Maybe we open up a vacation fund at our local bank in order to do that. Mid-range goal might be that maybe every 3 to 5 years I get maybe not a new car, but a newer car. And I'm putting aside most, if not all of those funds over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, maybe to buy that car outright. Purchase of a home, or maybe a new home. I need to come up with 20% down, plus closing costs and whatever. So how much will I need? What am I looking at purchasing? Am I looking at purchasing a 1-bedroom condo or a house? And so how much am I going to need to set aside over the course of the next 3 to 5 years for that down payment? And where are those funds going to come from? And then, of course, the long-term goals. Education could be one of them. I'm looking to go back to school, or as I like to key in on, retirement. Because again, as I mentioned before, 45 to 50% of Americans retire with nothing else to fall back on but a Social Security check. And unless we're willing to relocate to some South or Central American country where our dollar is going to go a lot further, and some people do for that reason, unless we're willing to do that, we need to set some other funds aside. And it really does not have to be much, especially if we're looking at long term on our side. I'm looking to put that aside over the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in some cases. Even if it's $20 or $30 a paycheck, or $20 or $30 a month, that's going to add up. And with compound interest and the way it can really start to take off, that'll really add up over a period of time to give us something in addition to Social Security to fall back on after we retire. All right, so we're looking at cash flow. We're looking at what's coming in versus what's going out. Cash flow coming in, anything obviously that's coming into the household. If I'm married, or I'm living with somebody, or just sharing expenses with somebody, sharing an apartment, or renting a house, and we're sharing whatever total is coming into the household, 2 paychecks, or in some cases Social Security, investment income, but whatever total is coming into the household as far as income versus what's going out in relation to expenses. And when we're looking, and of course, again, this is going to be my mantra for the whole presentation, is making sure we have more coming in than what's going out, with enough additional funds in between that we can set aside for those SMART goals we're looking to set aside funds for. So when it comes to expenses, money going out, we're looking at 2 types of expenses: fixed expenses and variable expenses. Variable expenses, of course, are those expenses that are going to vary, whether they vary naturally or we make them vary. And here's the example I use. Husband and wife, they live in a house run on electric. Everything's on electric. They have a heat pump and an air unit that's all run on electric. So they have an unseasonably warm winter one year, and they're not running the heat as much. And of course, their total bill is not going to be as much during the course of the winter because of that. So that's a natural variation. Or they make it vary. Hey, honey, one spouse goes to the other. Hey, honey, I did some calculations, and we're spending about $150 a month on the electric. A lot of that is the heat in the wintertime and the air in the summer. I think if we lowered the thermostat 5 degrees from 73 to 68 degrees in the wintertime, and we raise it 5 degrees from 68 to 73 in the summertime, I think it'll still be comfortable. And I think by doing that, we're going to save ourselves $50 a month on our electric bill just by adjusting that. So that's a variation. That's something that we make vary. Natural variation versus making it vary. And we can do that with other things as well. Groceries, could I buy more chicken rather than steak? Not only is it generally cheaper, but I should be eating healthier that way too. Entertainment, going out. Can I cut back on that? Could I look at doing some more things that don't cost me? The money that other forms of entertainment could cost me. So maybe looking at that, swapping out, as I like to call it, as opposed to cutting back on things. So variable expenses versus fixed expenses. Expenses we really can't do, like the mortgage, the rent, car insurance, car payments, fixed expenses we really can't do anything about. Or can we? Here's a question. Could fixed expenses also be variable? Now, here's the example, not all inclusive, of course, but here's the example of fixed expenses that we have, right? But if I rent, could I look around and find a lower priced option? Maybe I shop around. I've actually personally have done this several times. I had a family member that did this 5-10 years ago. Her and her husband shopped around and actually cut down on their rent enormously. So of course, it was a high rent area to begin with, but still. But could I look around? Maybe I find a place that's very similar to where I'm now living, in a similar area, convenient to things as well. Maybe I actually even find myself a better option at a lower rental fee. Maybe I could save myself $100 to $150 a month and get the same, or maybe even a better place to live by doing that. Now, if I'm locked into a lease for a year or 2 years, then I guess I can't do that, at least for now. But if I'm out of that lease period, could I shop around and find a lower priced option? Same thing with the mortgage. Even though mortgages, the mortgage rates are starting to go up. Maybe I mortgaged some years ago at like 8 or 9%, and I could remortgage and still save myself some money by remortgaging at a lower rate. Insurance, car insurance. I shop around for car insurance every 3 to 5 years. Because normally those rates just every year creep up, but the starter rates tend to stay the same. So every 3 to 5 years I shop around, and the last time I shopped around and got new car insurance, I've saved myself $400 a year. So the whole point is, if we're looking to make some cutbacks to free up some cutbacks or swapping out to free up additional funds, we don't want to discount the so-called fixed expenses and concentrate on the variable expenses. All right, so what we want to do, it's kind of like the next step to this, we're going to track our spending. We're going to track our spending. We're going to write down everything that we spend money on, at least for 30 days. And my personal thought is probably 60 to 90 days, in case you have a 30-day period where it's just not a normal month. Number of expenses come up that I wouldn't normally have. So maybe I do it over 60 to 90 days to get a good gauge on what on average is going out the door. But we're going to track everything that's going out the door. Even if I buy a pack of gum, if whatever gum costs nowadays, I don't even chew gum, but say I buy a pack of gum and I want to write that down, because heck, maybe I'm a gumaholic. Maybe I go out on the road. I have a job that I'm driving truck or I'm doing something. I'm out on the road and I'm always stopping in here, stopping in there, getting a pack of gum here, pack of gum there. It's only $1 or it's only $1 for whatever it's costing me. But if you track that over a 30-year period, you may surprise yourself as to how much you're paying for those packs of gum. Same thing with the coffee. I love using the coffee analogy. Here's my coffee in my Starbucks cup, but I make my own coffee at home at a much cheaper price. But maybe I like going out to that fancy coffee shop every day, and I'm even getting a regular coffee, not even a cappuccino or whatever, a latte, but it's cost me $3 or $4 a pop. Again, we want to track this. It's only $4. It's only $4 here, $4 there. But if I'm going out every day and paying around $4 for that coffee over a 30-day period, that's $120. So we track everything that's going out the door. First of all, because we may surprise that we may think that we do have more money coming in than what's going out, and we may surprise ourselves and find out that it's a lot closer. Maybe we are living paycheck to paycheck. Every dollar that's coming in, there's a dollar going out, or in some cases, maybe there's more going out the door on a monthly basis than what's coming in. Even if it's just $30 to $50 a month, if on average, again, over that 90-day period, I have anywhere from $30 to $50 going out the door than what's coming in, I can pretty much guess that's happening just about every month. And $30 to $50 in the whole, that means every month I'm going deeper and deeper and deeper into debt, which we really don't want to do. So we may surprise ourselves and find that we do have as much going out the door, or more importantly, more going out the door than what's coming in. The other thing is, I think we surprise ourselves as to what we're spending money on and how much we're spending on that. Those packs of gum that I mentioned, the coffees that a lot of us like to have out, meals. People like to go out all the time. For me, I'm just going out, getting the lunch special. And I go out just about every day for lunch, but it's cost me, God, this day and age, it's cost me $10 or $15 a pop. So we're tracking everything. And that's the other reason, because we may surprise ourselves as to what we're spending our money on and how much we're spending it on. And as we're doing this, as we're using these trackers, and again, just like the financial goals worksheet, in this case, I forwarded 2 examples of financial trackers that you can certainly get from Nicole and use to track your expenses. But yeah, using those, that's where we're using those trackers. And as I'm doing that, I'm already starting to think about where I could cut back, or in some cases maybe cut out those spending leaks that some of us have. That's the other thing. You keep track of everything that goes out the door, and you might find that you're spending money on something that you wouldn't even miss if you completely cut it out. 2 examples that I have, that personal examples that I have, well, magazine subscriptions and these cable channels and these internet channels that I found I wasn't watching enough of. Let's start with the magazine subscriptions. I forget how many years ago I started doing more, like a lot of other people. We have these smartphones, we have our in some cases our laptops or our pads, and I found that everything the reason I was getting these magazines, well, I was starting to read that stuff all online, and it dawned on me, as I'm doing my own financial tracker, wait a second, I'm not even reading these magazines anymore. Most of them aren't even being taken out of the plastic wrapper. And I was paying, $50 to $60 a year for, I think it was 5 magazine subscriptions, 5 to 6 magazine subscriptions at $50 to $60 a pop every year. I don't know what that comes out to on a monthly basis, but even if it's $10 or $15, I realized $10 or $15 going out the door that I wouldn't even miss if I canceled those subscriptions. So I did. And I don't miss them because, again, I'm doing everything online. Same thing with the cable channels and the internet channels. Cutting out cable channels and packages I really didn't need. And the same with the internet channels. Now, I didn't have a lot of the internet channels, but a couple of them. A couple of the internet channels, and I cut out the ones I really was not watching, and saved myself probably another $10, $10, $15, $20 a month, $30 a month, between the cable and the internet channel. So those spending leaks that we're spending money on, we wouldn't miss it if we totally eliminated it. So another reason for doing the spending trackers. So we do this again for 30, 60, or 90 days. And now basically we know where we're at and where we want to go to. Like I said, as we're using these spending trackers over the 30 days, the 60 days, the 90 days, we're already starting to think about where we could cut back, or again, in some cases, swap out in order to free up some additional funds that could be used elsewhere for these financial goals that we're looking to achieve. And as we're doing that, we're going to start assigning spending allotments for these things. And there's different ways that we can do it. Now, I sent along to Nicole examples of the handouts that are basically examples of the 3 forms that we're talking about: the financial goals worksheet, the spending tracker, which we just covered, and soon we'll be talking about the spending plan itself, or the basic budgeting worksheet itself. So you could use those handouts. You could make copies of them. I got them off the internet. You could, and there's a whole slew of them on the internet. So you can certainly go to the internet. There's something that you find that you like better. You could certainly, print that out and use it. There's software that you can use. Spreadsheet. You could create your own spreadsheets online. Just create your own spreadsheet that way. I'm simple. I've been told I've been simple a number of times, but I live by myself. I don't have a lot coming and going. It's very easy for me to track everything that does come and go. So I basically use a pad and pen. I get out the pad and I just create my own columns and write everything down that way. There's companies that you can hire to create a spending plan or a budget for you, and you can hire them to create that and to help you stick to that spending plan, to advise you or whatever they do. Now, the ironic thing there is, those services aren't free. You have to pay for those services. So it's something else that you have to add to your spending plan if you go that route. But different ways that you can do it. You find the way that works best for you and you just do it. All right. So again, we're creating the plan. We're creating the spending plan. I sent out those 2 examples of spending plans. And what we want to do is we want to list all of our monthly expenses. We're going to use the information from our spending trackers. And now we're going to plan where we're going to spend all that money on paper. And this is, again, as we're even doing the spending tracker, we're already thinking about that. Oh my God, I'm spending $120 a month on coffee. I didn't realize I was spending that much. Do I need to have those coffees out all the time, or do I need to go to the fancy coffee shop for it? Maybe I went to the convenience store a couple times and found I could get the same coffee, maybe in a larger cup at half the price. Heck, if I start going to my convenience store, maybe it's not as nice as the fancy coffee shop, but maybe it's good enough that I go there every day for my coffee, and I cut it in half. Now I'm spending $60 a month roughly rather than $120. I've just freed up $60 that could be used elsewhere. Could 50 of that be the 50 that I need over the next 6 months to set aside for that new smartphone that I'm looking to get, or newer smartphone that I'm looking to get, as opposed to throwing something else on the plastic card? And we do that with everything. Those spending leaks that we talked about. I figured I probably, with between the magazine subscriptions and the channels, probably $30 or $40 a month that I freed up by eliminating those things, and I'm not missing them. So there's another $30 or $40 that I have. 60 and 40, that gives me $100 total just between those 2 things. And we do that with other things as well. We look at our entertainment, we look at food. Can we make cuts here? Can we make cuts there? Or swapping out. If I was able to find a new apartment, same type, same size, just as nice, and in an area that's just as nice, just as convenient for me, and I was able to save $100 a month. Now there's another $100 a month. Now I have $200 a month in additional funds that I can use here, I can use there. Of course, we're deciding, that's why the financial goals worksheet, where those additional funds are going to be placed. So we're doing that, and it's recommended that we use a plan. We don't have to. Recommended we use a plan where we have a budgeted column and an actual column on the sheet. The budgeted column is what we want to spend. We're going to plug in there, the electric I talked about, husband and wife. The one spouse figures they're going to save themselves $50 a month on their electric bill, just by lowering the thermostat. Maybe a few other things too, like turning lights out. They find they're leaving lights on, and they turn lights out. And by doing that combined, they're going to say maybe they go from spending $150 a month on electric to $100 a month on electric. We've just freed up another $50. So we're going to budget $100 a month for our electric, and we just freed up another $50. And this is what we're doing. This is what we're gonna spend. Maybe with that coffee, maybe I decide to when I do go out, I'm going to go to the convenience store at half the price, and maybe start making my own coffees at home. making it even cheaper. By the way, people with money will spend money on things that'll help them save money in the long run. And I'll explain that. The coffee, for example, somebody with real money or with money might go out and pay a couple $100 for a really nice coffee, cappuccino, latte, espresso maker, for at home. And they start making their own. They have their travel mug that they take with them. They start making their own at home, and in no time, they've actually probably less than a year, they've covered the cost of that machine, because they're making most, if not all, of their coffees at home, as opposed to going out to the fancy coffee shop. The gum, that chewing gum habit that somebody might have, and they realize, oh my God, maybe I'm spending $60 a month on chewing gum. By buying a pack here, buying a pack there, if I go to the grocery store, I can get a 10-pack at a much cheaper price. But you know what? When I was in the wholesale club the other day, I saw I could get a whole case of my favorite chewing gum for $40, and that case would probably cover me for 2 months. So if I got a case, I essentially would cut down $60 a month to $20 a month. And so we're doing this with everything that we go through. And again, either cutting back, or what I like to talk about, swapping out, to getting the same bang for less buck. Yeah, so if we use a sheet that has a budgeted column and an actual column, at the end of the month, we can go down to the actual column and write down what we actually spent, what actually went out the door. And then we can compare to the two. Did we stick to our budget? Did we go over budget? Did we go under budget? Could I re-budget? Maybe with those coffees, I'm making more at home, and I realize I'm not even spending the $60 I budgeted for my coffees out. I'm making more at home, and it only cost me $30 out for those coffees. So maybe I re-budget that. Maybe I lower it. Maybe I don't lower it to 30. Maybe I lower it to 40. I pad it a little bit, give myself 1 or 2 extra coffees out, but maybe I re-budget at $40, and I've just freed up another 20, over the next month. Maybe I went over budget with some things. What did I do? What can I do to make sure I stick to that budget, or go below? So that's what we use, the budgeted column and the actual column, that we could see how we did at the end of the month. Sometimes income and debt don't balance. What can you do? We've talked mainly about cutting back or swapping out to free up additional funds. But on the flip side, could we increase what's coming in? Could I go out and maybe I have a full-time job, but could I go out and get a part-time job? Maybe on the weekends. Maybe I don't have any hobbies and I get bored on the weekends anyway. So I go out and get myself a part-time job and bring some additional income in that way. Could I take on a roommate? Do I have an apartment that has 2 bedrooms? I take on a roommate, either a family member or a friend, and we share expenses. I bring more income in that way. By renting a room or sharing expenses. Taxes, a side business. Could I turn a hobby into a side business, or maybe even a full-time business? I had an uncle who passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately, but he loved woodworking, loved working with his hands. He loved woodworking, had himself a little woodworking shop in his basement, and he used to make family and friends for their kids. Family and friends who had young kids, he would make them these beautiful wooden toys, trains, trucks, cars. Did a fantastic job. And everyone kept saying, oh, you should start making and selling these. So he did. He started going to craft fairs and making these wooden toys and selling them at craft fairs. And he ended up making more money doing that than what he was making on his full-time job. So basically the bottom line is, can we bring more in? Can we bring more in? And then, of course, going back to the flip side, can we reduce what's going out? Can we cut back or reduce or swap out to free up some additional funds? That entertainment. Am I going out 3, 4, 5 times, am I eating out a lot and going out with friends, and could I cut back on that? Can I, can I cut back on that? Um, food, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes your healthier food choices are your cheaper food choices as well. Chicken versus steak. Now maybe I still like to have that steak every so often. Could I? But for my health, could I start eating more chicken breast and less steak, and also save some money that way. Frozen fruits and vegetables versus fresh. I read this all the time, that frozen fruits and vegetables, not only are they generally cheaper than fresh fruits and vegetables, but they're healthier as well. Why? Because when these things get picked, they get flash frozen, and when they're flash frozen, that locks in all the vitamins and nutrients, and those vitamins and nutrients stay locked in until we get that food at home, and we take it out of the freezer and cook it and eat it. Fresh fruits and vegetables, again, from what I read, the longer the longer they lay around, they get picked, they get put in storage, it gets to a wholesaler ships them to the grocery store sells it. The longer they sit around, the more vitamins and nutrients they lose. And sometimes till we finally eat a fresh fruit or vegetable, there's little to no nutritional value. And not to say anything, of course, about the money that's wasted, by throwing some of it away. It sits around too long, and we end up throwing it away rather than eating it. So now, a lot more difficult to make a salad out of frozen vegetables than fresh. So I'm obviously, but still, the things that we can do to either cut back or swap out to free up some additional funds. Transportation. Am I in a situation where I could utilize public transportation as opposed to having my own vehicle? I watched a video where a guy talked about the total cost of owning a car, and on average, the total monthly cost for owning a car is $500 to $600 a month. Are we in a situation where we could utilize public transportation, or even an Uber now and then, as opposed to having our own car, and save some dollars that way? And then other things too. Clothing, talked about plugging those spending leaks as well. Now, we need the basics: food, shelter, clothing, transportation. Once go beyond the basics and increase our quality of life, but unfortunately, that's where some people get into trouble. This is where I talk about the keeping up with the Joneses. I think a lot of us are still familiar with that, keeping up with it, and I think that's what a lot of it comes down to. The Joneses have brand new, top of the line, all the bells and whistles, matching SUVs sitting in their driveway. Now we feel we got to go out and get the same thing. We have to have the same thing. They bought a bigger and better house. We have to go out and get a bigger and better house. They go out to nice fancy restaurants all the time, take nice fancy vacations all the time. We feel we need to follow suit. For all we know, the Joneses may be and probably are one paycheck away from total financial ruin, because they have to have this, they have to have that, they have to go here, they have to do that. And if we're following suit, we're going down the same path that they're going down. We don't have to do that. We don't have to do that. Would I love to have a brand new top of the line SUV, absolutely. But again, a lot of these, by the way, going back to living below our means, a lot of millionaires out there. And one financial guru on YouTube actually put a number to it. He said that the millionaires millionaires you wouldn't even know are millionaires, but millionaires that generally have between $1 and $10 million, you wouldn't even know are millionaires. They live in normal houses, they drive normal cars. They're probably following the Warren Buffett, motto, so to speak. Buying a car that's a couple years used. Not living extravagantly. They like the fact that they have that money sitting in an account someplace that they have to fall back on in case it's needed. what we don't want to do, again, is follow the Joneses and go deeper and deeper and deeper into debt and throw things on those plastic cards. We want to reverse that if we're there, or not do it, so we don't go there. We want to cut down. If we have debt, we want to cut down on that debt. I do another presentation where I quote Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein, a quote, he said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. And I think we know what he means by that. Would we rather earn compound interest or pay it? And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there paying compound interest because they have to have, and they're throwing things on plastic cards, taking out loans, so on and so forth. We don't want to do that. We want to cut down on debt, and we want to be able to set funds aside. And again, we'll be talking about that shortly. This is the coffee analogy I talked about. A lot of us in our office are coffee drinkers, so we use that. We love using that as an example. But you can look at other things as well. Eating out, clothing. These designer clothing. Clothes. Could we go out to the thrift store? Some of these thrift stores you go to, the clothing that you see, they still have tags on them. They were never even used. And you can buy them at a fraction of the price. So we look at ways that we could cut back, or as I said, maybe swap out to free up, to cut back on our spending, and to free up those additional funds for those things that we want to set money aside for. All right, we kind of talked about this earlier. An emergency savings fund can help you be prepared for the unexpected. Job loss, emergency bills, illness, so on and so forth. We need to have a short-term fund, or a short-term emergency fund, as we'll call it. And we generally have those in places like our savings account, checking account, money market account. CDs, you got to be careful with CDs, because you're setting that money aside for 6 months, a year or so, but readily accessible, like money market accounts, savings accounts, checking accounts, readily accessible when that emergency comes up. Not if it comes up, when it comes up. When an emergency comes up, we have those funds available to pay for it. Again, so we're not going even further into putting something else on that plastic card. We have those funds available. Experts say that we should have at least 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in an emergency fund to pay for those emergencies that will come up. Some experts say as many as 12 months, but at least 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. On that note, again, we want to make sure, if I don't have an emergency fund, or for those of you who maybe are, again, for those of us that are looking for work, we're now looking about, after I get that next great job, and I have that income coming in, that maybe that's when I'm looking at starting this. But we set those funds aside. So we're looking at what are my expenses, what are my monthly expenses, what am I going to need, and where am I going to find those additional funds to set aside on a monthly to build that up to where I need it. Same thing with the long-term retirement fund. And again, it doesn't take much with compound interest, and with those retirement accounts, we're not now looking at what we're calling savings, and we're now looking at investing. Savings, money that we have in savings, is meant to keep pace with inflation, although the rates that they're paying now, I think, is below inflation. But investing, and we're talking about investing, we're talking about stocks, bonds, money market funds, something that we can get into. We get it, especially if we get a job with an employer that has a retirement account, where we can put money into that retirement account, and it gets invested into stocks and bonds and mutual funds for invest. But those are investing dollars. So savings dollars we want to set aside for our emergency funds in our savings accounts. But with other money, we want to be able to set that aside in those long-term retirement accounts, to keep ahead of inflation. And that's where we make out in the long run. And again, we don't need much. $20 or $30 a paycheck or $20 or $30 a month with compound interest over 10, 20, 30 years, it really adds up. And after about the first 10 or 15 years, that snowball effect that happens with compound interest really starts to take off. You really start to see it take off after about the first 10 or 15 years. All right, so as you progress and make your spending plan a habit, what about funding? We talked about funding the emergency account. We need to do that, as well as we want to look at our long-term retirement goals, as well as other SMART goals. We're looking to, that new phone, that new smartphone that I'm looking to get this year, that new car that I'm looking to, your newer car that I'm looking to get in 3 to 5 years. Those types of things and other similar. Where am I going to find the additional funds? Those end of year holiday expenses a lot of people have. And when I say end of year holiday expenses, I generally talk about Thanksgiving, New Year's, and then whatever holiday we celebrate in between. Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever holiday we celebrate in between. For some of us, some people might cost them $1,000 or more for those end of year holiday funds. We know it's coming. We know we're going to spend that money. Could I set funds aside over the course of the next? Could I open up a holiday fund at my bank and put money into that fund, so at least I have most of that money covered? Again, as opposed to putting something on the plastic card and then paying it off over time. Those holiday expenses, they term that people will spend. They'll take up to the next 6 or 7 months paying those off. And as you can imagine, once they have those paid off, a couple months later, they're gearing up and doing it all over again. And those high interest rates that are on those credit cards. So we want to be able to do it. So could one of my SMART goals be putting funds aside for those end of year holiday goals as well? So other SMART goals, and reevaluating our priorities. I'd like to have filet mignon every night, and at a different fancy restaurant every night, and driving up in my BMW. It's not going to happen, at least for me. And I don't want it to happen in that respect, unless I really had the extra money, to do that. But you don't need it. And again, it's reevaluating our priorities and making sure we have those funds available to use, as opposed to going into debt and going further into debt, or like a lot of people living paycheck to paycheck with nothing else to fall back on. All right, so a spending plan isn't worth much if you don't go back and review it. Priorities and goals change. Make sure you monitor and adjust as needed. Things are going to come, things are going to go. In that scenario I gave you with the smartphone, I get a new smartphone every 3 to 5 years. So once I got that new smartphone, I'm not looking at that's going to come off my spending plan for the next 3 to 5 years until I'm ready to get a new one. Maybe something else gets added once that gets taken off. There's something else I need to set funds aside for over the next year or the next 3 to 5 years that gets put on. Maybe I get a raise at my job, and now maybe I have an extra $50, $100, $150 a month coming in. Coming in that was an expense. I have those additional funds coming in. What can I do with those funds, as opposed to just blowing the money, so to speak? Where could those funds be used, and so on and so. So it's going to ebb and flow. Things are going to come. It's going to be in constant flux, and we just adjust as needed. The other thing is too, I think after we do this for a while, we might not have to do this every month. After a while, we get to know, and maybe we do it we do our budget every other month. Right now, I'm doing about like once a quarter. I sit down and I make sure that I'm still on track with my goals. Again, making sure I have more coming in than what's going out, and I have those funds and where those funds are going to go. I might sit down once a quarter and go over that to make sure that I'm still on track. And you probably get to the same point as well. All right, so at this point, we're going to, I guess we can stop. That will end my presentation. Here's my contact information. If anyone needs